Hey everybody, this is Miss Andrea Almogel, your pre-service teacher in English. I just want you all to welcome in our quarter 3 week number 4, wherein we're going to talk about the different approaches to literary criticism. But before anything else, let us start our day with a prayer. Dear Lord and Father of all, thank you for today. Thank you for ways in which you provide for us all. For your protection and love, we thank you. Help us to focus our hearts and minds now on what we are about to learn. Inspire us by your Holy Spirit as we listen and write. Guide us by your eternal light as we discover more about the world around us. We ask all of this in the name of Jesus. Amen. Okay, I hope you all are doing safe and fine today. So now let's move on to the discussion of most essential learning competency wherein you are critic a literary selection focusing on power struggles of characters or the narcissist and gender relationships of the characters, which is the feminist. And we also need to talk about the learning objectives wherein at the end of our discussion, I am expecting you will be able to recognize the different approaches to literary criticism, differentiate the examples of literary criticism, understand and analyze the given literary piece, and create a literary critic. So as a review, last time I discussed two different approaches in quarter 3 week number 3. In this review, I will just assess if you already understand what I have discussed to you last time. Okay. Uh, in this, you are just going to um look at these jumbled letters and answer the following question, okay? Number 1, it focuses on the literary elements, including the style, structure, and tone to determine effects of the text on the readers. Okay, if your answer is formalist, then you are correct. Next one. This critical approach is concerned with the content and values. Content and values. What type of literary approach is this? Okay. So if your answer here is moralist, then you are correct. Next one, we have it refers to the typical structures used by writers in their works to convey his or her messages in a simple manner to the readers. Again, it refers to the typical structures used by writers in their works to convey his or her messages in a simple manner to the readers. Okay, if your answer here is literary devices, then you are correct. And then next one, you are comparing two unrelated objects by using the words like or as. What type of literary device is this? Okay, if your answer is simile, then you are correct. Next, the last one is, this is the matching vowel sounds at the end of words or lines. What do you call this? Okay, so if your answer is rhyme, then you are correct. Okay, very good, all of you. Let's proceed now to our next game, which is the guess the word. In this game, I just want to assess if you already have any idea about what we are going to talk about for today's lesson. Okay, number 1, this is the comparison. analysis, interpretation, and or evaluation of works of literature. Comparison, analysis, interpretation, and or evaluation of works of literature. What is this? Okay, if your answer is literary criticism, then you are correct. Next one, it refers to critical approaches that analyze, interpret, or evaluate the inherent features of a text. It refers to a critical approaches that analyze, interpret, or evaluate the inherent features of a text. What is this? Okay, so if your answer is formalist, then you are correct. Next one, it is a type of literary critic that judges the value of the literature based on its moral or ethical teachings. It is based on its moral or ethical teachings. So if your answer here is moralist, then you are correct. Okay, the next one is, it is a literary critic which focuses on power struggles of the characters. Focuses on power struggles of the characters. What is the answer? If your answer here is Marxist, then you are correct. Next one, it examines how some aspects of our culture are inherently patriarchal or male dominated. Oh, patriarchal or male dominated. What type of literary approach is this? Okay, if your answer is feminist, then you are correct. Next one, it sees literature as both a reflection and a product of the times and circumstances in which it is written. Oh, it sees literature as both a reflection and a product of times and when it was written. Okay, so if your answer here is historical, then you are correct. And then the last one is, text itself has no meaning until it is read by a reader. Again, the text itself has no meaning until it is read by a reader. Okay, so if your answer here is read the response, then you are correct. Okay, very good, grade 10 students. I hope that this learning that you have in your mind right now will be widened later on as we discuss the topic. Here, people have been telling stories and sharing responses to stories since the beginning of time. Look at here. By reading and discussing literature, we expand our imagination, a sense of what is possible, and the ability to empathize with others, right? Reading and discussing literature can enhance our ability to write. It can sharpen our critical faculties and enables us to assess works and better understand why literature can have such a powerful effect in our lives. Okay, now let us define what is literary criticism. Okay, so when we say literary criticism, it is you are comparing, you are analyzing, interpreting, and evaluating works of literature. Literary criticism is essentially an opinion here, but a type of opinion wherein you need to put proof, or it must be supported by evidence relating to the theme, the style, to the setting or historical or political context of the story. And it usually includes the discussions of the work's content and integrates your ideas with others. Insights gained from research. Okay. And also, literary criticism may have a positive or negative bias. Here, it may have positive or negative, and maybe a study of an individual piece of literature or an author's body of work. And also here you need to remember that okay, literary criticism is not a plot summary, biography of the author, or simply finding fault with the literature. Although criticism may include some of the following elements in order to support an idea, it is not a plot summary. It is not biography. Instead, um, it is more on you are assessing, criticizing the work of art or the literary piece. Here, when we say literary piece, we are talking about the work of art. For example, is the poems, stories, novels that you are reading. Without this literary piece, literary criticism is useless. How can you assess or how can you evaluate a piece without this uh, literary piece? And also, one thing that you need to do in order for you to do the literary criticism is you need to read. And in doing the literary criticism, we have here different approaches to be used. We have the formalist, moralist, Marxist, feminist, historical, and then the last one is the response. Let's now first talk about the formalist approach. When we say formalist approach, it refers to a critical approach that analyze, interpret, or evaluate inherent features of a text. And these features include not only the grammar and syntax, but also literary devices such as meter and figures of speech. Here, inform, um, in formalist criticism, we are dealing more on the text and not with any outside considerations such as the authors, the real world, and the audience or other literature. Meaning, um, only the text need focus, the text only, because meaning is determinant. All other considerations are irrelevant. The focus here is the literary devices and sound devices used in the text. Like for example, the grammars also, and also the figures of speech that you can observe, like metaphors used, the personification used, and the different other things. Also, formalist approach reduces the importance of a text historical, biographical, and cultural context. Okay, the next one we have here is moralist approach, wherein it is a type of critic that judges the value of the literature based on its moral or ethical teachings. Here it is concerned with the content and the values that you might get in the story, and what you call this, is concerned in moral or intellectual criticism, not only to discover the meaning of the story, but also to determine whether this work of literature are both true and significant. And to study literature from this approach, you need to determine whether a work is conveys a lesson or a message, and whether it can help the readers or youth lead better lives and improve their understanding of the world. And also using this approach, literature is ethically sound and virtuous is praised, while the literature that misguides and corrupts is condemned. And this approach will be valuable as long as readers expect literature to be applicable to their own lives, or you will relate the morals or the lessons that you might get in this story to your lives, and you will assess if how these lessons or how these morals affects the main story itself. And then the third example of literary approach is the Marxist approach, wherein it focuses more on the power struggles of the characters, and it also concerns with the class differences, economic, as well as the implications and complications of the capitalist system. Here, in Marx's approach, it is interested in um, answering the question, whom does the work benefit? Is it the elite, the middle class, and also Marxist critics are interested in how the lower or working classes are oppressed in everyday life and literature. Here, it focuses on how literary works or literary pieces are products of the economic and what you call this ideological determinants specific to that era. This critic examined the relationship of a literary product to the actual economic and social reality of time and place. Like, for example, the class stratification, the class relations, and then the dominant ideology. One of my example here is, you all know this, that in your history class or your Araling Lipunan class, your teacher would always give an example, would always say that women before, during those ancient times, they are oppressed by men, meaning they are not allowed to do works for men. Like, for example, they are just staying inside the house. They are not allowed to do any jobs or to vote or something like that. The oppression of men to women. And here it concerns with the analysis of the clash of opposing social classes, such as the what you call this, the ruling class or the bourgeois or the elites, and working class, the proletariat, as it shaped the events that transpired in the story. Okay, next, also my example here in Marxist approach is that you all know the Titanic movie. In there, that you can observe that most of the characters are elite people. Or you can also see there how they treat the people in the lower levels of the society, right? Here, next one, we have the feminist approach, or the gender relationships of characters in the story. It advocates gender equality, especially towards women. It also examines how some aspects of our culture are inherently patriarchal or male dominated. Here, we are more of focusing more on the women characters in the story. This feminist approach focuses on the female representation, just like what the name says, feminist. We are paying attention to the female points of view, concerns, and values. We are also talking about here, or focusing here, women's role in society as portrayed through the text. It typically analyzes the plight of women as depicted to the, what you call this, story. Generally, it criticizes the belief a woman is construct how the woman is construct in a story. I have here the difference between the Marxist criticism and feminist criticism. Uh, we are in feminist, we are dealing with how is the author male or female, if it is narrated by a male or a female, or what are the roles of women, are the female characters are the protagonists or the secondary characters, or does it do any stereotypical characterizations of women appear, like, for example, um, men are judging women, like, doing jobs for men only, like, for example, driving. Men would always say she can't do it because she's a woman. She can't drive, right? She can't do works that are for men only. That is stereotyping. And also, how does the author's culture influence his or her attitude? And then the last one is what are the attitudes of male characters towards the female characters? Here, you can check the story. You can see, you can observe how how male characters treat the female characters. So for example, if they are hurting the woman physically, you can tell it here in this feminist criticism. While in Marxist criticism, we are observing or assessing what is the social class of the author, if he or she belongs to the higher level, upper level, or the lower level of the poor people, and which class does the work aim to represent, what values that reinforce, subvert, and what conflict can be seen between the values of the work champions and those it portrays, and what social classes does the characters represents, and how do the characters from different classes interact or conflict. So now we have the historical approach, wherein it sees literature as both a reflection and a product of the times and circumstances in which it is written. And here, it focuses more on examining the text primarily in relation to the history and the cultural condition of its production, and also its critical interpretations. And it relies heavily on the author and his world. When it was written, why did the author wrote the story, and also in the historical view, it is important to understand the author and his world in order to understand his intent or his the message that he wants or the author wants to imply. And in this view, the work is informed by the author's beliefs, the time it was written, and the history. And to fully understand the work, we must understand the author and his age. Remember that, huh? And then the last one, we have the reader response criticism, wherein it is concerned with how the work is viewed by the audience. In this approach, the reader creates meaning, not the author or the work. Once the work is published, the author is no longer relevant. Here, literature may be judged according to how the reader perceives it instead of what the author's message. This is more on about your point of view about the story, your perception about the story, and your understanding. The text itself has no meaning until it is read by a reader. The reader creates the meaning, and analysis of the reader's role in the production of meaning makes someone's reading a function of personal identity. And also, in here, it recognizes the different people view works differently, and that people's interpretation changes over time. This is more on about your understanding of the story. Okay, let's sum it up first. First we have the formalist approach, wherein it is more about the structure, and we have the structure of the story or the text. We also have the moralist approach, wherein we are focusing more on the morals that we can get in the story, and how will we relate our lives to that moral. And then we have the Marxist, wherein it is about the struggles of the characters, and it includes the social class, political, the economical, and cultural. And then we have the feminist. It is more on characters of roles of the women in the story. How does men oppress them, something like that. And then we also have the um historical, wherein our focus here is about the history of the story, when it was written, why it was written, the age of the author, and then the events happened during the time it was written, like for example, the World War, martial law, like that. And then the last one, we have the reader response criticism, wherein the text is selfless without the reader because it focus more on the perception or the view of the reader. Okay, now let's do this. It is to be answered in your paper. Just send the copy of this. Send a copy of this um, exercises to our group chat. Okay, this one. These are the different perspectives we consider when looking at the piece of literature. A, literary theories, literary criticism, or critical approach. Next one, the criticism that asserts that a great deal of meaning in a text lies with how the reader responds to it. A, reader response, reading response, responsive reading, or reading response. Next, it asserts that most literature throughout time has been written by men or for men only. A, masculinity, B, feminist, C, feminism, D, masculine. Number 4, criticism is concerned with the role, position, and influence of women in a literary text. A, Marxist, B, feminist, C, gender. Okay, number 5. This is number 5, huh? Number 5, what approach to literary criticism requires the critic to know about the author's life and times? A, historical, B, feminist, C, formalist. And then the last one is examine in its own terms, nothing outside the text, no outside information. A, formalist, B, historical, and C, reader response. Okay. One of our way to sum up the lessons that we discussed today is for you to answer this. What have you learned in our discussion today? What are the important things that we need to remember in this lesson? And then why is it important to critique a literary piece? Oh, you would just have to take a picture of your paper and send it in our group. You can write there 1 to 2 sentences. Okay? You still have any questions? If none, then I need to remind all of you to, your assignment would be answer the learning activity. It is in your work text. Do the assessments. It is also in your work text, and do it in a one whole sheet of paper and take a picture and send it in our group. And then the last one is to answer the items 46 to 60 of your third quarterly assessment. Okay? Do you still have any questions? If none, then thank you for listening and thank you for watching this video. I hope you all are doing fine and safe. Again, this is Miss Andrea Almogel, your pre-service teacher in English. God bless everyone.